And we have to realize that we should think about the questions themselves and where they're emanating from, and perhaps the questions themselves are flawed. And I want to give you just one simple example that the right always uses, Islamophobes always use, and they make a very big deal of it. And that is, they say, for example, your Prophet, astaghfirullah, was, and they use a very vulgar word, interested in young people. And I don't want to use the word out of respect for the Prophet, because the age of Aisha was young age. It was 9 years old in the Sahih Bukhari hadith. Okay, she was 9 years old according to Hadith of Bukhari. And so they use a very vulgar word. And I've had young men and women come to me, Muslims, and they say, how can we accept this? This is something that is vulgar. It's unethical. I can't believe that a prophet would do this. Now, this person, and this is a classic example, this question is emanating from a particular mind, coming from a particular culture, of a particular generation, and a particular time, and a particular place. The worst enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, who smeared him with everything imaginable, they couldn't even think of this as a flaw. Why? Because cultures vary, practices vary. And it's not just Islamic or Arab culture. The reality is, 500, 1,000 years ago, the world over, people were marrying at younger ages. Why? Because the lifespan was shorter and young kids became mature faster. A 9-year-old of 1400 years ago is like a 16, 17-year-old intellectually and biologically of our times. So when we say 9, we are back projecting our 9-year-old of 2014, Detroit, imagining a 9-year-old girl, and then back projecting that into Medina and saying, oh, how could our Prophet marry somebody that's 9? See, this is a cultural bias. Go do the research. In some states to this day, I'm from one of them, Tennessee, you can marry people at the age of 14 or 15, right? It's not magical, the age of 18. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the average age of getting married was in your teen. 500 even more so. Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo and Juliet was written, do you know the age of Romeo and Juliet in the Shakespeare's play? Romeo and Juliet are supposed to be 14 and 13 years old. And that's why they had 14 and 13-year-old actors play Romeo and Juliet. Now in our times, if Romeo and Juliet were 14 and 13, they'd go to jail for pedophilia or something like this, right? You don't, but look, when Shakespeare's writing, and Shakespeare's only 500 years ago, Romeo and Juliet are supposed to be 14 and 13 because of his era. 14 and 13 is like our era, 18 and 17. If this is something 500 years ago, and subhanAllah, not even 500, again, go look back in this country, in the 1800s, early 1900s, the average age of marriage was early 20s to teens, in this country. And this is in America. In many other countries to this day, the age of marriage is still much younger. And I don't mind telling you this, my own grandmother, and she was born in British India, my own grandmother got married at the age of 14. She was 14 years old when she got married. And I remember talking to her as she's passed away, Allah yarhamha. I remember asking her, and I was at the time 17, 18, so I couldn't imagine getting married at 14. And I said, how could you get married at 14? And she was like, son, beta, everybody got married at that age. All my friends, we all got married at that age. And this is 1920s British India. We're not talking about, 1,000 years ago. So for us to be so gung-ho, so passionate, how could our Prophet ﷺ have done that? SubhanAllah, who should we blame first? Our own intellect or the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ? And of course, this leads us to the issue of how do we respond to these charges. And there are many Muslims, they just don't understand and they buckle under the pressure and they start, figuring out, well, Aisha was actually 18. Very convenient because 18 is the age of marriage here. I'm pretty sure 100 years from now when the age is raised to 1920, automatically Aisha's age will miraculously rise up to 1920. That's not the way to answer these questions. Aisha never complained. She was the happiest wife in the world. She loved the marriage of the Prophet. She loved the Prophet. She's not angry. She's not complaining. This is a 1,400-year-old culture. Now nobody's saying we need to resurrect that in our times. And I don't have any problem as a faqih, as a theologian, as an imam to say, okay, in our age, a 9-year-old girl does not qualify to get married. We have to wait till she's older. No problem. Many ulama are saying that. But for us to feel this complex, and then we have young people coming up to us, how could Islam allow X? Why does the Quran say Y? Take a step back and ask yourself, why am I asking this question? Where is this question emanating from? Perhaps my own understanding should be questioned before questioning the Quran and Sunnah.